Emily sat in the dimly lit living room, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the rim of her coffee cup. It had been 2 years, and she still couldn't escape the echo of those final words he had said to her. "I can't do this anymore, Emily. I never signed up for this life." The day her husband walked out, abandoning her when she needed him the most, had been the day everything inside her broke. But it wasn't just heartbreak that twisted her insides. It was the betrayal. The feeling that the person she had trusted with her life had just discarded her as if she meant nothing. At first, Emily had tried to pick up the shattered pieces of her life. She threw herself into work, poured herself into every project she could handle, hoping it would somehow fill the emptiness. But it didn't. No matter how much she tried to distract herself, the pain kept creeping back. He had left her for another woman, someone who seemed to have everything Emily didn't: youth, beauty, and freedom. She could feel the anger building up inside her, gnawing at her like a slow-burning fire. And that's when it hit her. Revenge. She didn't need to stay stuck in the ashes of her own misery. She wasn't the same person anymore, and she wouldn't let herself be the victim. Emily had always been underestimated. She was the quiet, reserved type, the one who spent more time tending to her responsibilities than fighting for the spotlight. But that day, when he left, she realized something. She had always been the one who held things together. She had always been the one behind the scenes, making sure everything was running smoothly, all while carrying the burden alone. But no more. She began to think of ways to make him feel the weight of his choices. She started small, like finding out where he'd been going every evening and who the woman was that had taken his place. She discovered more than she expected. He wasn't just seeing her. He was planning a life with her, a life he had promised Emily. The rage began to boil inside her, and she realized she wasn't going to get closure from him. So she would have to take control. The plan began to take shape in her mind, a plan that would not only make him regret everything, but would leave him exposed in front of everyone. She knew that revenge wasn't just about making him feel the pain she had. No, it had to be deeper than that. It had to be personal, and it had to be devastating. As she sipped her coffee, Emily stared out the window, the city lights flickering in the distance. The woman she had been, the one who believed in forgiveness and second chances, was slipping away, and in her place was someone new, someone darker, someone who wouldn't stop until her husband paid for what he'd done. But as she thought about it, a question lingered. Was it the revenge she wanted, or was it the justice? Could revenge ever truly heal the wounds? It was a line she was willing to cross, but deep inside, Emily couldn't help but wonder whether it would be worth the cost. Could she truly walk away from this as a victor, or would she find herself more broken than ever? Days turned into weeks, and Emily's life began to take on a different rhythm. She woke up every morning with the same fire burning inside her, the fire that had replaced the cold, empty space left by his departure. It was no longer about mourning what she had lost. It was about taking back what was rightfully hers. But as the plan took form, she couldn't deny the darker side of herself that was emerging. The small things she had dismissed before, like his absence during their marriage, started to twist in her mind. She remembered the times he would come home late, reeking of another woman's perfume, the lies, the excuses, the promises that meant nothing. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. And that anger began to feel less like a burden and more like a weapon she could wield. Emily began her investigation into his new life, but it wasn't as simple as just finding out who his new lover was. No, she needed to get into his world, the world where he thought no one could touch him. She had to dig deep into his social circles, his business associates, and most importantly, his vulnerabilities. She couldn't afford to make any mistakes. She knew he would be watching her too, but he had underestimated her, just as everyone always had. It started with his business, something he was passionate about, the thing that had always been his escape. Emily knew that he had a reputation in the industry, one he had worked tirelessly to build. But what he didn't know was that she had been quietly learning the ropes of the business too. While he was out living his new life, Emily was in the background, watching, studying, preparing for the right moment. She reached out to his closest colleagues, carefully befriending them, learning about the deals, the partnerships, and the shady practices that no one talked about. She wasn't just a widow at home crying over her lost love. She was an expert at blending in, getting the information she needed without raising suspicion. Every conversation, every interaction was calculated. Emily had learned the art of deception, but in a way, it felt like it was a part of her all along. One evening, while scrolling through a social media post that her ex-husband's new partner had shared, Emily found herself staring at the image of the woman she once feared, the woman who had replaced her, her perfect smile, her flawless skin. She was everything Emily wasn't. But what Emily noticed next, what made her blood run cold, was something that changed everything. The woman was wearing a ring, one that looked oddly familiar. It was his, the ring he had promised Emily before their wedding. It had been passed down through generations in his family, a symbol of their future together. The betrayal was now personal. It wasn't just another lover. It was the very thing that had tied them together. The thought of the woman wearing that ring in her place, holding on to a future that was never meant for her, made Emily's resolve even stronger. She dug deeper into his new life, and the more she uncovered, the more the pieces fell into place. There were whispers about a deal he was working on, one that involved selling his company. The deal was huge, and it could change everything for him. But Emily knew something he didn't. The deal wasn't as secure as he thought it was. There were financial discrepancies, and if the wrong person found out, it could destroy everything he had built. Emily had everything she needed now. She had the leverage, the secrets, and the means to bring him down. But there was still one thing she had to do: make sure that his new life was as vulnerable as the one he had left behind. She began to spread rumors, planting seeds of doubt in the industry. Small whispers, nothing that would catch his attention right away, just enough to make him question everything he thought was secure. But the emotional weight was starting to take its toll. Every time she moved closer to her goal, Emily felt a piece of herself slipping away. Was this what she really wanted? The anger? The need for revenge? It felt right, but it also felt empty. She would lie awake at night, the silence of her apartment echoing around her, and she would wonder whether it was all worth it. The woman in the ring, the business deals, the secrets. It was all coming together, but so was the question that haunted her every moment. What would be left for her when it was all over? What was she really fighting for? She hadn't just lost her husband. She had lost herself, too. And as the final pieces fell into place, Emily knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back now. She had gone too far to stop. Emily sat in the dim glow of her laptop screen, the numbers from the deal still running through her mind. She had known something wasn't right. But now, with everything laid out before her, the pieces of the puzzle were clearer than ever. Her husband had taken her for granted for far too long. So many lies, so much deceit. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about everything. About how he thought he could just walk away from her and leave her with nothing. No money, no love, and no support. But now she had something that would ruin him. The deal he was working on, the one he believed was a golden ticket, was on the brink of collapsing. Emily knew that if the financial discrepancies she had uncovered were exposed, it would bring his company to its knees. It wasn't just about the money. It was about revenge. This was how she was going to make him feel the weight of his choices. She wasn't just going to ruin his business. She was going to ruin his entire world. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she prepared to send an anonymous email to the board of his company. It was a calculated risk. If they believed the information she was providing, the deal would fall apart. And if that happened, he would be exposed for the fraud he was. She knew it would cost him everything. The respect, the reputation, and the life he had built with the woman who had taken Emily's place. But Emily wasn't sure if she was ready for what it would do to her. She had spent weeks preparing, but now that the moment was here, she could feel a chill creeping up her spine. She wasn't just breaking him, she was breaking herself too. The fear and guilt gnawed at her, but she couldn't stop now. It was too late for that. Revenge wasn't something that came without a price, and she was prepared to pay it. Emily pressed send, her heart pounding in her chest. There was no going back now. It was done. She closed her laptop and sat back in her chair, trying to steady her breathing. But as the minutes ticked by, something strange happened, an unexpected wave of regret. She had wanted this, hadn't she? She had plotted, planned, and manipulated everything to this point. But now that she had set the wheels in motion, the reality of what she had done hit her. She wasn't just punishing him. She was punishing herself, too. What was left for her now? Was this really justice? Or was it just a way to fill the emptiness inside her? She could feel the pieces of her soul slipping away with each step she took down this dark path. She had become the very thing she had once despised, the person who plotted and schemed to hurt others. But it wasn't just the fear that held her back. It was the memories of when things had been good between them, before the lies, before the betrayal. She remembered the days when he used to hold her close, the nights they spent talking about their future. Those memories had started to fade, replaced by the harsh reality of what had been done. And now, there was nothing but the shadow of the man she had once loved. The phone rang, snapping Emily from her thoughts. It was a call she wasn't expecting, but one she had been dreading. It was him, the man who had destroyed everything. Her heart skipped a beat as she hesitated, but curiosity won out. She answered the call. "Emily," his voice was low, almost apologetic. "I need to talk." Her stomach twisted. He sounded different, almost as if he had no idea what was coming. He didn't know that his world was about to collapse. He didn't know that the very thing he had taken for granted was about to slip through his fingers. "I'm not interested in talking," Emily replied, her voice cold, controlled. "I'm sorry," he continued. "I know I've made mistakes. But this isn't how I wanted it to end. I still care about you, Emily. I always did. The words cut through her like a knife. She could feel the weight of the lie hanging in the air. He had never cared about her. Not enough to stay. Not enough to be faithful. Not enough to love her the way she had loved him. You don't get to say that now, Emily said, her voice shaking, though she quickly masked it with ice. Not after everything you've done. I know I messed up, but please, just hear me out. Why? So you can beg for forgiveness? It's too late for that, she snapped. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Emily could almost hear him trying to find the right words, trying to make it all go back to what it was. But there was no going back. She had made sure of that. I'm not calling for your forgiveness, he said softly. I just want you to know, it's not what you think. I didn't leave because of her. I left because I couldn't live with myself anymore. The truth is, I've been lying to everyone, especially you. There's something you don't know. Emily's breath caught in her throat. His words hit her like a slap, and a surge of anxiety flooded her chest. What was he talking about? What truth? But before she could ask, he hung up. The phone went silent, but the words kept echoing in her mind. There was something she didn't know, something big, and now she had to know what it was. Emily sat frozen, the phone still pressed against her ear, her heart racing. He'd said something important. Something that made her feel like the ground beneath her was shifting. There was a truth she didn't know. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of his words, trying to figure out what he meant. He had always been a master of manipulation, so how could she trust him now? But something about the way he spoke, the hint of vulnerability in his voice, made her wonder. Was there more to this story? More than she had uncovered? She didn't have time to second-guess herself. She needed answers. Emily jumped up from the chair, her mind spinning with possibilities. What was he hiding? What was it that he hadn't told her before? Her thoughts went back to the plan she had set in motion. The email had already been sent, the rumors already planted. She had taken down his business, at least she hoped she had. But this new revelation, this mystery, threatened to throw everything off course. What if there was something bigger, something even more damaging to him than the business deal? What if all the things she had uncovered were only the tip of the iceberg? Emily grabbed her coat and rushed out the door. She had to get to the one place that might hold the key to it all, his office, the place where he thought he was untouchable. He might have been a liar, a cheater, a man who had abandoned her when she needed him the most. But there was something even more sinister she had to uncover. The drive was long, the streets passing by in a blur as her mind churned with questions. The rain had started to fall, a soft patter against the windows, as if the world itself was urging her on. She was determined, but the weight of uncertainty pressed down on her. What if the truth was too much to handle? What if, by the time she uncovered it, it was too late? She had wanted this, hadn't she? She had plotted, planned, and manipulated everything to this point. But now that she had set the wheels in motion, the reality of what she had done hit her. She wasn't just punishing him. She was punishing herself, too. What was left for her now? Was this really justice? Or was it just a way to fill the emptiness inside her? She could feel the pieces of her soul slipping away with each step she took down this dark path. She had become the very thing she had once despised, the person who plotted and schemed to hurt others. But it wasn't just the fear that held her back. It was the memories. The memories of when things had been good between them. Before the lies. Before the betrayal. She remembered the days when he used to hold her close, the nights they spent talking about their future. Those memories had started to fade, replaced by the harsh reality of what had been done. And now, there was nothing but the shadow of the man she had once loved. The phone rang, snapping Emily from her thoughts. It was a call she wasn't expecting, but one she had been dreading. It was him, the man who had destroyed everything. Her heart skipped a beat as she hesitated, but curiosity won out. She answered the call. "Emily," his voice was low, almost apologetic. "I need to talk." Her stomach twisted. He sounded different, almost as if he had no idea what was coming. He didn't know that his world was about to collapse. He didn't know that the very thing he had taken for granted was about to slip through his fingers. "I'm not interested in talking," Emily replied, her voice cold, controlled. "I'm sorry," he continued. "I know I've made mistakes, but this isn't how I wanted it to end. I still care about you, Emily. I always did." The words cut through her like a knife. She could feel the weight of the lie hanging in the air. He had never cared about her. Not enough to stay. Not enough to be faithful. Not enough to love her the way she had loved him. "You don't get to say that now," Emily said, her voice shaking, though she quickly masked it with ice. "Not after everything you've done. I know I messed up, but please, just hear me out." "Why? So you can beg for forgiveness?" "It's too late for that," she snapped. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Emily could almost hear him trying to find the right words, trying to make it all go back to what it was. But there was no going back. She had made sure of that. "I'm not calling for your forgiveness," he said softly. "I just want you to know it's not what you think. I didn't leave because of her. I left because I couldn't live with myself anymore. The truth is, I've been lying to everyone, especially you. There's something you don't know." Emily's breath caught in her throat. His words hit her like a slap, and a surge of anxiety flooded her chest. What was he talking about? What truth? But before she could ask, he hung up. The phone went silent, but the words kept echoing in her mind. There was something she didn't know, something big. And now she had to know what it was. Emily sat frozen, the phone still pressed against her ear, her heart racing. He'd said something important, something that made her feel like the ground beneath her was shifting. There was a truth she didn't know. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of his words, trying to figure out what he meant. He had always been a master of manipulation, so how could she trust him now? But something about the way he spoke, the hint of vulnerability in his voice, made her wonder. Was there more to this story? More than she had uncovered? She didn't have time to second-guess herself. She needed answers. Emily jumped up from the chair, her mind spinning with possibilities. What was he hiding? What was it that he hadn't told her before? Her thoughts went back to the plan she had set in motion. The email had already been sent, the rumors already planted. She had taken down his business, at least she hoped she had. But this new revelation, this mystery, threatened to throw everything off course. What if there was something bigger, something even more damaging to him than the business deal? What if all the things she had uncovered were only the tip of the iceberg? Emily grabbed her coat and rushed out the door. She had to get to the one place that might hold the key to it all. His office. The place where he thought he was untouchable. He might have been a liar, a cheater, a man who had abandoned her when she needed him the most. But there was something even more sinister she had to uncover. The drive was long, the streets passing by in a blur as her mind churned with questions. The rain had started to fall, a soft patter against the windows, as if the world itself was urging her on. She was determined, but the weight of uncertainty pressed down on her. What if the truth was too much to handle? What if, by the time she uncovered it, it was too late? She had to get this letter into the right hands, people who would be able to dig deeper into the mess her ex-husband had made. But who? The police were one option, but she didn't trust them. They were too entangled with people like him, people who played the game from behind closed doors, always one step ahead. She thought about her options and then remembered something. A former colleague of hers from the finance world, someone who had connections and could expose corruption for what it truly was. Emily had worked with him years ago before she left the corporate world behind to focus on her family. She hadn't kept in touch, but she knew he would still have the resources to make things happen. Without hesitation, she pulled out her phone and dialed his number. The line rang 3 times before he picked up. "Emily? Long time no talk?" His voice was familiar, but there was an edge to it, like he knew something was up. "I need your help," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. "It's about something big, something dangerous." "What kind of danger are we talking about here?" he asked, his tone shifting to one of concern. "Financial? Criminal? Something that could ruin a lot of lives, and I need you to help me expose it," Emily explained quickly, her words rushing out. She didn't have time to waste with pleasantries. "I've got evidence, and I need someone who can get it into the right hands." There was a pause on the other end. Emily could almost hear him weighing the situation. "All right, meet me at my office in an hour. I'll help you, but you have to trust me," he finally said. Emily didn't hesitate. "I'll be there." She hung up the phone and made her way to her car, the sense of urgency growing stronger with each passing minute. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that this was the only way forward. She couldn't just expose him for his betrayal. She had to make sure the truth was known by everyone, the people who had supported him, the ones who had helped him build his empire. They all needed to see him for what he really was, a man who had built his success on lies, manipulation, and criminal activity. The ride to his office felt longer than it actually was. Emily kept her eyes on the road, but her mind was elsewhere, on the letter, on the truth that was now in her possession, and on what it would take to bring her husband down. She wasn't just going to take the moral high ground this time. She wasn't going to sit back and let him go free. No, she was going to make sure he paid for every single thing he had done to her, to their family, and to the people whose lives he had destroyed with his greed. As she pulled into the parking lot, Emily took a deep breath and steadied her nerves. She wasn't scared, not anymore. The past few weeks had changed her, had made her stronger than she had ever been. She wasn't just a victim of betrayal. She was a woman with a plan, and she was going to see it through to the end. She walked into the building, her steps confident. There was no turning back now. Emily stood in front of the glass doors, her hand resting on the handle. She could hear the faint hum of the office building, the usual noises of a place filled with business people working tirelessly to climb the ladder. But for her, this was the first step toward bringing everything crashing down. She didn't feel nervous anymore. Nor did she feel the guilt she had once felt. All she felt was a cold, steady determination. She had a goal now, and nothing would stand in her way. She stepped inside, the familiar smell of coffee and polished wood filling her nostrils. The receptionist greeted her with a smile, but Emily barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed ahead on the office doors at the end of the hallway. She had made the decision to walk this path, and she wasn't going to turn back. This was bigger than the betrayal, bigger than the man who had promised her a future and then shattered it. This was about taking control of her own life again. When she reached his office, Emily knocked once, and before he could respond, she turned the handle and walked inside. He was sitting at his desk, his eyes lighting up as he looked up at her. The man she had once known as her colleague, her confidant, and a friend now seemed distant and almost unfamiliar. His smile was strained, but he was trying to mask his surprise. He hadn't expected her to show up. "Emily," he said, standing up to greet her. "You actually came." "I didn't have a choice," she replied coldly, walking past him into the office. She shut the door behind her with a quiet click. "I need your help, and I need it now." He studied her for a moment, his expression shifting from polite curiosity to genuine concern. "You don't look like you've been sleeping much." Emily didn't respond to the comment. Instead, she placed her bag on the desk and pulled out the crumpled letter she had found in her husband's office. She slapped it down in front of him, and his eyes immediately narrowed as he scanned the contents. "This—" He stopped himself, the weight of what he was reading becoming clear. "This is bad, Emily. I mean, really bad." "Yeah," she said, her voice hard. "That's why I need your help. He's been hiding this from everyone, from the authorities, from the people who invested in his company. If I don't expose it, he'll just continue to get away with it. I can't let that happen. Not after everything he's done to me, and to so many others." He nodded, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk as he absorbed the information. "You're right. This isn't just business anymore. This is a criminal operation. We're talking about fraud, money laundering, and connections with people who, let's just say, they don't play by the rules." Emily's heart pounded as he spoke. Her husband's world was darker than she had ever imagined. But in a strange way, the revelation gave her strength. He hadn't just betrayed her. He had destroyed lives with his greed, his lies, and his manipulation. And now Emily was going to make sure he paid the price. "So, what do we do?" she asked, her voice steady, now fully in control. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers pressing against his lips. "First, we need to make sure the right people see this letter. We can't just send it off to the police or the media. They'll be looking for a way to cover it up, or worse, they'll be bought off. We need leverage, something that will force their hand." Emily thought for a moment. "I've got it," she said, her eyes lighting up with the realization. "I'll leak it to the media, but not just anyone. We'll make sure the news outlets that can't be controlled get their hands on it. And once they start asking the right questions, we'll make sure the authorities have no choice but to investigate." Her ex-colleague leaned forward, impressed. "That's risky. If you do it right, it'll get the right attention. If not, it'll all fall apart before it even begins." "I know," she said, her voice low but determined. "But I don't care anymore. He's ruined everything. My life, my trust in people. I need to make sure he loses everything he's built. I want him to face the consequences of his actions, everything he's done, to me, to others, to everyone he's hurt." Her colleague stared at her, his eyes softened with understanding. I get it, and I'll help you. But once this is out, there's no going back. Emily didn't hesitate. I'm not looking back. They spent the next hour working through the details. Emily shared everything she had learned over the past few weeks. His secret accounts, the shady deals, the people involved. With her colleagues' resources and connections, they made a plan. They would leak the letter to a few trusted investigative journalists, people who had a track record of exposing high-profile corruption. The first step was the hardest, sending the email. Emily sat at the computer, her finger hovering over the send button. She paused, just for a moment, the gravity of what she was about to do sinking in. This wasn't just about getting back at her husband. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about something far bigger: justice. With one final breath, Emily pressed send. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. Emily had done everything she could to prepare for the fallout, but nothing could have prepared her for the way everything started to unfold. After she sent the email, it was as if a fuse had been lit. The firestorm began slowly at first. An article here, a tweet there. But before long, the news was everywhere. The papers picked it up, and soon enough, every major news outlet was running the story. The corrupt deals, the illegal activities, the money laundering. It was all out in the open. Emily watched it all unfold, her eyes glued to the screen as the world began to turn against her ex-husband. She could almost hear the panic in his voice when she saw the first press release. It wasn't long before his company issued a statement, attempting to spin the story, to downplay the severity of the situation. But it wasn't working. His carefully constructed empire was crumbling. People he had once trusted began to turn on him, as whispers of his illegal activities spread like wildfire. It was surreal to watch. Surreal to see the man who had once controlled everything now reduced to a man scrambling to hold on to his crumbling world. But as satisfying as it was to see him squirm, Emily couldn't help but feel a twinge of something else. Guilt, maybe. Was this really what she wanted? She had planned this, after all, engineered this chaos. She had set this wheel in motion, but now that it was rolling, she was starting to see the true cost of it all. For years, she had been the one holding everything together. Now, her actions were breaking everything apart. Not just his life, but also the lives of the people who had worked for him, who had been loyal to him. She had destroyed a world that had been built on lies, yes, but also a world full of innocent people who were now caught in the fallout. Emily couldn't help but wonder if she had crossed a line. Was the destruction worth it? Was the revenge she had so desperately sought really going to heal the wounds, or was it just creating more? It wasn't long before the authorities began to take notice. Investigations were launched, and Emily could feel the tension mounting. Her ex-husband was on the defensive now, trying to cover his tracks, trying to salvage what little was left of his reputation. But it was no use. The media had him in their sights, and there was nothing he could do to escape the truth. It wasn't just his business that was in danger anymore. It was his freedom. The criminal activities he had been involved in were no longer just rumors. They were solid facts, backed up by documents, emails, and testimonies. It was only a matter of time before the full force of the law came crashing down on him. Despite the chaos, Emily felt strangely detached from it all. She wasn't celebrating. She wasn't taking pleasure in watching him unravel. No, instead, she felt the weight of the situation settling heavily on her shoulders. The victory she had so desperately sought didn't feel like a victory at all. It felt hollow. She had thought this would bring her closure, that seeing him pay for his betrayal, his lies, would somehow make everything right. But now that it was happening, she realized something. Revenge hadn't given her the peace she had expected. It had only deepened the emptiness she had felt after he left her. She had been so consumed by the need for justice, for retribution, that she hadn't stopped to think about what would come next. But there was one thing Emily hadn't anticipated, something she hadn't thought about until now. Her own strength, the person she had become in the process. She wasn't the same woman she had been when he walked out on her. No, she was someone different now, stronger, sharper, and more capable than she had ever known herself to be. As the days went on, the investigation into her ex-husband's crimes deepened. His assets were frozen, his accounts were audited, and his reputation was in tatters. His business associates started to distance themselves, one by one, and the woman who had been the catalyst for everything watched from the sidelines, no longer a passive victim, but an active force in her own life. Yet, despite the world crashing down around him, Emily couldn't escape the questions that lingered in her mind. What now? What did she do with all of this? What did she do with the knowledge that, no matter what happened next, she had irrevocably changed the course of their lives? She had won. She had achieved what she set out to do. But as she sat alone in her apartment, her eyes fixed on the news reports, she realized that victory wasn't the same thing as peace. As the hours passed, Emily felt a growing sense of isolation. She had taken control, had reclaimed her power, but now she had to face the aftermath, the wreckage of what had been done. The haunting question remained, was the revenge worth it? Days turned into weeks, and Emily watched as the story unfolded. The press coverage was relentless. Her ex-husband's name was now synonymous with corruption, deceit, and betrayal. His empire, once built on lies, crumbled under the weight of the truth. His business was taken over by investigators, his assets seized, and his reputation tarnished beyond repair. His connections turned their backs on him, distancing themselves from the man who had once seemed untouchable. His new lover, his supposed escape from the life he had abandoned, was now dragged into the mess, her involvement in the scandal revealed for all to see. But Emily felt no satisfaction, no peace. The rage she had once carried inside her, the need for revenge, had dissipated into something darker. She had won, yes, but it wasn't a victory she could claim with pride. The more she saw the repercussions of her actions, the more she realized the destruction she had unleashed. It wasn't just his life she had ruined, it was everyone who had trusted him, everyone who had been caught in the web of his lies. She had thought this would heal her, that exposing him would bring her closure. But all she felt now was emptiness. The rage that had burned so brightly had turned into a quiet sadness. The damage was done, and there was no going back. Revenge had never been the answer. One evening, as she sat in her quiet apartment, reflecting on everything that had transpired, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. She hesitated before opening it, but then something made her click it. Emily, I know what I did was unforgivable, but I owe you the truth. You were never the problem. I was. I was scared of what I had become, and I took it all out on you. I never wanted to hurt you. I know I failed you. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. It was from him. her ex-husband. For a moment, she stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the screen. She didn't know how to feel. All the anger, all the bitterness rushed back in an instant, but so did the years of hurt. She couldn't forgive him, not after everything he had done. But in that moment, something shifted inside her. She realized that her anger, her need for revenge, had only kept her trapped in the past. The man she had once loved was now just a shadow of who he used to be, and she didn't need to carry that weight with her anymore. She deleted the message without replying, closing her phone with a soft sigh. Emily had done what she set out to do, but now she was free. Free from the chains of her past, free from the anger that had consumed her for so long. The path she had taken to get here had been painful, but it had taught her something valuable. Revenge doesn't heal wounds, it only deepens them. True peace doesn't come from making others pay for their wrongs. It comes from letting go and moving forward no matter how hard it might seem. As the months passed, Emily rebuilt her life. She focused on her career, on the things that truly mattered, and slowly, she began to find a sense of peace within herself. She wasn't the woman she had been before her husband's betrayal. She was stronger, more resilient. And though she would never forget what had happened, she had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes, the best revenge is living well and moving on. If you've ever felt betrayed, if you've ever been torn apart by someone you loved, remember this: revenge is not the answer. Letting go of the past, healing yourself, and finding peace within is. Don't let the darkness consume you. Rise above it. And if you want to hear more stories like Emily's, subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for more lessons in life, love, and personal growth. The journey to healing starts with one step, and sometimes that step is the hardest one to take. But remember, peace is found in moving forward, not in holding on to the past. Oh,